Hi, this is The Business Guy. The 80-20 rule is one of the most important rules to use to make economic decisions in life. The 80-20 principle is one of the biggest secrets to success by achieving more with less, and I suggest you read the book on the topic by Richard Koch. And we'll start with a quote from Richard Koch where he says, the 80-20 principle, like the truth, can make you free. You can work less, and at the same time you can earn more and enjoy more. The only price that you need to pay is to do some serious 80-20 thinking. And we've all been exposed to the 80-20 principle at some point in our lives. The principle states quite simply that 20% of the efforts lead to 80% of results. And whether you know it as the Pareto principle or the principle of least effort, it's an incredibly powerful concept. Now, a lot of people talk about the 80-20 principle as a core component of their time management and self-development programs. Richard Koch, a former Bain & Company and BCG consultant, provides quite an entertaining and practical application of the theory, and it's a really great book. In fact, I really recommend it. And in fact, you could say he's becoming the living guru on the subject. And if you enjoy this video, you'll definitely enjoy the book, which is densely packed with big ideas that you can apply to your business, relationships, time management tactics, and even discovering and living your purpose. And if you enjoy this quick look at the book and these ideas, please help me out by clicking the like button below so YouTube promotes this video. Thanks so much. And you can also click the subscribe button below and the notification bell so that when more videos come out like this, you'll be up to date right away. So let's go ahead and get right into it so you can focus your time and energy on the activities that give you the most results. Now, the first big idea that Pareto and 80-20 gives is that the principle is really everywhere. Koch says that 80-20 thinking comes with practice and enables us to spot the really few important things that are happening and to ignore the mass of unimportant things. It also teaches us to see the wood from the trees, as he puts it. So it was 1897 when Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian economist, was studying wealth and income distribution in 19th century England. Now, during the course of his studies, he discovered the majority of land and income was controlled by a minority of the population. In fact, 20% of the population controlled 80% of the wealth and income. Then on further analysis, he says that he found this principle held true not only in different countries, in different time periods, but also in contexts such as his garden, where he discovered that 20% of his pea pods yield 80% of the peas that were harvested. And since our pal Vilfredo identified the trends, many researchers have been busy pointing out some of the additional modern applications. I mean, check out this. 20% of criminals account for 80% of crime. 20% of motorists account for 80% of accidents. 20% of married individuals account for 80% of divorces. 20% of your carpet probably gets 80% of the wear. 20% of the streets account for 80% of the traffic. 20% of the product flaws account for 80% of the problems. 20% of the clients usually account for 80% of their profits. Now, I could go on, but I think you really get the idea. Okay, why not a few more? 20% of clothes in your closet are probably worn 80% of the time, and perhaps my favorite, 20% of the beer drinkers drink about 80% of the beer. Are you in that group? All right, I'm done for now. Your job, however, has barely begun. Look around you. See where you spend your time. See where you get your results. Is it 50-50 or is it more like 80-20? All right, let's go ahead and move into applying the principle. The next logical question is clearly, okay, I get it, but how does this apply to me? Well, as Koch states, 20% of what we do leads to 80% of the results, but 80% of what we do leads to only 20%. So really, we're wasting 80% of our time on low-value outcomes. Therefore, his advice, rather than pursuing every available opportunity, he suggests we calm down, work less, and target a limited number of very valuable goals where the 80-20 principle will work for us. Koch spends half of the book on how to apply the 80-20 principles to your business, including a chapter on why your strategy is wrong. And then he dives into a detailed process to help you figure out what's up with the 80-20s currently hiding in your business. Now remember, he's a former very successful consultant, so he's extremely good at bringing the principle to life in your business if you're running a business, and then have the sense you're not quite focusing on the 20% you should be focusing on. You'll absolutely love the book just for those chapters. For this section, however, I'm going to only briefly touch on some of the business stuff, and then we'll get into the personal applications the other half of the book covers to bring out some of Koch's equally brilliant big ideas for your overall champion's journey. So let's go to the business strategy. Koch says, and I quote, the 80-20 principle that your strategy is wrong if you make most of your money out of a small part of your activity. As a result, you should turn your company upside down and concentrate your efforts on multiplying this small part. All right, a very quick look at applying the 80-20 to your business starts with this quote: 20% of products usually account for about 80% of dollar sales value. 20% of customers, 20% of products for customers usually account for about 80% of your organization's profits. So the question is, do you know where your revenue comes from? Find out. Do you know where you spend your time? Find out. Here's what the book suggests. It is most certainly true that you make at least 80% of your profits in cash with 20% of your activity and 20% of your revenues. So the trick is to work out which 20%. I've always been passionate about simplifying my business and focusing my team's efforts on the few activities that we believe would yield the greatest results during our startup phases. How about starting with that you are wasting time and activities you know aren't yielding the results? So you want to stop and find the 20% of stuff that's working and do more of that starting now. One more quote. He says, executives may suspect that while some customers and some products are more profitable than others, but the extent of the differences is proven, they're likely to be surprised and sometimes dumbfounded. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a peek at how we can apply the 80-20 principle to living our champion's journey in the non-business context. Bringing forth incredible passion for creating your ideal life is palpable as you read his words. In fact, it's truly amazing. And the way he weaves the 80-20 into creating your ideal is genius. So let's start with step number 1. In fact, it's really a good step number for just about any process, really. He says, be unreasonable. He says everything you want should be yours. The type of work you want, the relationship you need, the social, mental, aesthetic simulation that will make you happy and fulfilled, the money you require for the lifestyle that's appropriate to you, and any requirement that you may or may not have for achievement or service to others. And if you don't aim for it all, you'll never get it all. To aim for it requires that you know what you want, and that's simply genius. And it comes from chapter 11, which is entitled, You Can Always Get What You Want, which may be just one of the best chapter titles ever. So rule number 1, we simply need to know what we want. So what do you want? Write it down. It also helps to be unreasonable. Now, George Bernard Shaw says this: the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. So we'll start with a simple question. What's your ideal? What do you absolutely love to do? What comes to you effortlessly? With whom do you love to spend your time? What would you be doing throughout the day? How much money would you make? Where would you live? Would you be able to hike or meditate or sit in your sauna whenever you want while you're making a living? Good. Let that keep flowing. Grab your journal or a sheet of paper and write down what flows through you right now. Seriously, we need to quit putting stuff like this off because we rarely get around to doing it later. So I'm really, really serious right now. If you can write something down right now, write it down so you can really get a handle on what you want and start living your ideal life. Does what you have and what you're doing match up with these ideals? And of course, then you can do something about it. All right, the next big idea, rule number 2 is this: find out what comes easy to you and focus on that. What you find easy, and this is where most motivational writers go wrong, they assume you should do the things that are difficult for you. Now, I love that this wisdom is echoed throughout the book. Martin Seligman says this in his classic book, Authentic Happiness. He says, I do not believe that you should devote too much effort to correcting your weaknesses. Rather, I believe the highest success in living, in the deepest emotional satisfaction, comes from building and using your signature strengths. Leo Buscaglia says, you are the best you, and you will always be the second best anyone else. So as champions, we need to pursue those few things that we are amazingly better at than others, and that you enjoy the most. So that really begs the question, what are you amazingly better at than others? I suggest you write a list of things that you feel you're amazingly better at the most. So right now, write it down if you can. Really, get some traction on what you're most passionate about. Okay, now let's take a look at the people with whom you'll be sharing this joyous life, and we'll move into the next big idea on relationships. Koch says this: rule number 3 is about relationships. Relationships help us define who we are and what we can become. Most of us trace our success to pivotal relationships. All right, here's a newsflash. 20% of your friends and loved ones probably account for about 80% of your enjoyment and satisfaction. So the question is, why wouldn't you spend a lot more time with that group that gives you so much pleasure and a lot less with the other group? Coke has a brilliant exercise to bring the truth of the 80-20 applied to those relationships in your life. So go ahead and write it down on a piece of paper. You can immediately burn it afterwards if you want to. Write down the names of your top 20 friends and loved ones and the people with whom you have the most important relationships. And go ahead and rank them from most to least important. All right, you got that? Good. Now the next step is, let's say you have 20 points. So go ahead and allocate those points to those people according to how much value they give you in your life relative to one another. As Coke says, you may need more than one pass at the numbers to get them to 100%. And what you're likely to find is that around 4 of the people, which would be your 20%, gives you 80% of your joy. The next step, you have 100 units again. Next to the enjoyment numbers, write down how much time you spend with each person, such that the total comes up to 100. So what did you come up with? Are you spending far less than 80% of your time with the 20% who give you so much joy? So the action implication should be plain. Go for the quality rather than the quantity. Spend your time and emotional energy reinforcing and deepening the relationships that are most important. And last, do you think this is some weird idea from an overly zealous consultant/author? Keep in mind that Abraham Maslow, the greatest psychological researcher, who created his hierarchy of needs and coined the phrase self-actualization, says pretty much the same thing. He says self-actualizing people, that is, people living their best lives in their peak state, have these especially deep ties with rather few individuals. Their circle of friends is rather small. The ones they love profoundly are few in number. Partly, this is the reason that being very close to someone in this self-actualizing style seems to require a good deal of time devotion. And when you're living in this peak state and maximum productivity, you likely haven't gotten time for many friends. Okay, rule number 4. Rule number 4 is about learning. Learn by focusing on the 20%. Coke shares a story of the wisdom of his tutor at Oxford, who told him not to attend lectures because, quote, books can be read faster, but never read a book from cover to cover except for pleasure. Now, when you're working the system, you can find out what the book is saying, and you can do it much faster than you would. And you do it like this. First, read the conclusion, then the introduction, and then the conclusion again, and then dip slightly into any interesting bits. Now, I love that idea. But how do most people read a book? They read it from cover to cover. So why should you do this? Unless you're reading it for pleasure. I mean, you're wasting a lot of time. 80% of the valuable content can be found in 20% of the book. And according to Coke, and absorbed in 20% of the time it takes most people to read the entire book. So read the conclusions, check out the graphs and charts and pictures and leading questions, and then read and mind map the content. So again, unless you're reading for pleasure, read the conclusion, then the intro, check out the graphs and pictures, then the conclusion again, and maybe some sections a little deeper if you find it particularly interesting, and teach your kids to do the same if you have them. I mean, you can even apply it to health and nutrition. Most people get a little confused by all the conflicting information the experts share these days. So why not 80-20 your diet and exercise? The reality is that 20% of your healthy eating and workout habits account for about 80% of your health. So focus on the fundamentals. That 20% will give you 80% of the gains you're looking for. So what are the fundamentals? The obvious stuff that we all know we should be doing, but few actually do. And again, on the subject of health, are you drinking enough water? To get to that amount, you take your body weight in pounds, divide it in half, and drink that many ounces. Are you eating breakfast? Eating fresh fruit and vegetables? Are you avoiding refined foods and refined sugar and avoiding saturated fat? You do these things and you're 80% there. And I think you'll be surprised at how quickly your energy will increase, not to mention how quickly the number of compliments from your spouse or significant others or friends will increase as well. And finally, the best idea from this great book is rule number 5, focus on the 20%. That is, whenever you spot a 20% activity, run to it, surround yourself with it, immerse yourself in it. If it appears to be more than you can imagine, then multiply your imagination. 80-20 is all about focusing your energy. Now, conventional wisdom is to not put all your eggs in one basket. 80-20 wisdom is to choose the basket carefully and then load all of your eggs into it and then watch it like a hawk. And it's amazing how many people hedge their bets. I mean, what about you? Are you holding back from pursuing your dreams, hedging a bit and waiting until just the right time? That time will probably never come, by the way. So discover what you're most enthusiastic about, stick with it, and focus your energy on how you can serve the world by sharing your gifts with enthusiasm. But what are you waiting for? Choose your basket carefully and load all your eggs into it, and then create your ideal life. All right, that wraps up the 80-20 principle. So what are the 20% of the things that give you 80% of your results? Do more of it. What takes 80% of your time that gives you little results? Do less of it. So there you have it. Think 80-20 and act 80-20. Those who ignore the 80-20 principle are doomed to average results. And those who use it must bear the burden of exceptional achievement. And that's a burden I'm willing to bear. So put these principles into action in your life. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. See you next time. This is The Business Guy.